everyone, and welcome back to Haiti Prosperity Podcast. My name is Shaina Silva, and I am here with my co host and my father, Daniel Silva, talking about the future of Haiti. We've talked about structural forces that can impact the future of a nation. We touched on demographics and human development and how that impacts the future of a nation. We've talked about economics, environmental, and technological. Now, in this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about the governance of these structural forces. And for the context of Haiti, really looking at rebuilding the institutions that govern these things. But before we get started, I would love for you, Dad, to paint a picture of what the current situation is in Haiti today, especially since a lot of people in our audience are of the diaspora and may have never been to Haiti before and have mostly heard about the corruption and mismanagement, but very high level and vague. Can you paint a more concrete picture of what's happening in the country today and then lead us into what should be happening in the country in terms of how we manage these four different things that we touched on previously?
Okay, we have what we would call emerging dynamics. It's the dynamics between the forces within the country, and society is one of these dynamics. How does a society function within the way that it's being governed and how people react? So currently you have growing pessimism on the part of the population in Haiti, especially the youth. They don't have any jobs. They didn't finish school, or even when they finish school, they still don't have a process for getting employed. And you have very scarce resources for them to survive. So they are getting pessimistic about life in general, wavering confidence about themselves, about their neighbors, and about their communities at large. And that leads to insecurity. They have uncertainty about the future. Mistrust of institutions and governments as corrupt or inefficient in terms of the service or the services that should have been provided to them. So we are talking a population mostly young, between 14 years old to 28. That's where the bulk of the population reside, with a lot of energy, a lot of ambition in wanting to achieve certain levels in their lives, but they are not getting the proper support, which leads to this growing pessimism that exists there.
And taking on criminal activity, like joining gangs as an alternative to survival.
Yes.
In many circumstances.
Yeah. So once you fall into, starting being pessimistic, you start looking for a certain identity of sort. So when you hear that a young person joined a gang, it's a form of identity.
Right. Being
trying
part
to
of something.
Being part of something rather than nothing. And also they've seen their colleagues or comrades getting a little more successful by joining the gangs, in first of all for personal protection, and further even start gaining from having joined the gang. So the gang is a form of security of sort, and they start, in fact, the gang leaders have a form of parental oversight on the especially
Right.
younger ones
Yeah.
that need guidance,
Right.
and they are trained to act as roughly as one could be in
Right.
order to show that they can be part of this
Right.
something that we are
Something.
talking about. So
Wow.
those are the dynamics. And with today's technology, social media being one of them, those members of society, those young people, are part of today's global generation,
Yeah.
using the different social media platforms,
Yeah.
where they can see and in fact inform themselves
Yeah.
of certain parts of life. Most of the time they choose the wrong ones, because they can only relate to that.
Yeah.
So they are sort of strengthening their identities with global image coming at them,
Yeah.
and reinforcing it within their groupings. So it's sort of almost developing a form of doctrine in that sense.
Which can be dangerous.
Oh, it's extremely dangerous, because it's a doctrine of life that you wake up,
Set of
here are the
beliefs.
things. Yes.
It's a way of doing things, and that can be very
especially
dangerous.
when you don't believe in an institution,
Right.
you are disappointed with your country and your
Right.
environment.
And your focus is on survival.
Yes.
It's not
Yes.
on creating prosperity or generating abundance for the greater good. It's on surviving.
Survival.
Yeah.
So in unifying all of that through the platform, social media platform, and the way that communication is so intense in that population slice of sort, that certainly generate tension,
Yeah.
tensions, plural, turbulences, and transformations of their social way of interacting.
Right. Changing even what it means to be Haitian, ultimately.
Exactly. In fact, they are in that transition.
Creating a new culture. Essentially, creating an entirely new culture.
Absolutely. And I think
dissolving old traditions and everything.
Creating new ones, and that have memories, and that have been verified and validated, and that's what is a culture. Culture is everything that you can remember when you've forgotten everything.
Yeah.
So if what you remember is what you've been doing recently, and what you've been interacting with on social media platforms, and the types of exposure that you have about wealth and materialistic kinds of things, and your pessimism towards society and institutions, so your tendency is to go toward turbulences, tensions, and things of that nature.
And at the generational level, that can impact the breakdown of the family identity as well, because those traditions, those old traditions around family and bonding and remaining in a cell, are breaking down as well.
Yes, it's creating, and in fact, Haiti is creating that right now. It's creating a sort of form of individualism.
Survival
Everything
of the fittest.
evolves around that individual and his or her survival, and even profitability and dream, but purely individualistic as opposed to communal or community,
which has been the case
in the past, etc. But it's not just Haiti. It's a phenomenon of developing countries where the youth have felt that they've been abandoned by their government. You have that in Mali right now, and in different other countries, and it's something that needs to be monitored and addressed in order to improve on governance. That will provide better service.
Because ultimately, these are the people who are the future of the country.
They are the
They will be the future
the
leaders, the future mayors, the future presidents, the future teachers, the doctors. So
and the future consumers also.
and the future consumers.
By 2040, Africa will be, after India, one of the biggest, most populated continent, because it's not a country, but still it's that same package that will be almost second to none as far as population is concerned, and they'll certainly be number one in terms of young population, so younger even vis-a-vis the Indians themselves. So in that sense, Africa has a lot
Falls
to do with
inside
the Haiti format, and that is why Haiti needs to, connect somehow with Africa in that sense, not just because of the background, but because of the similarities in terms of challenges that could be leveraged, etc.
And I can say, having lived in Nigeria for a few years, seeing the stark similarities and the challenges that are faced, but also seeing progressive young people entering government, trying to make a change, trying to create programs that can address that sense of identity issue that exists. Nigeria, not to veer off too far from the topic of Haiti, but has over 234 tribes that have their own identities. So governing 234 tribes within the context of these 4 different structural forces is like layers upon layers of things to really study and intentionally address in a bite-sized way, because those are really deep. At least for Haiti, we can say that we are a tribe. There's different segments of our tribe, but we all speak Creole. But those 232 tribes in Nigeria, they all speak a different language. Yoruba, Hausa, Igbo. So there's another layer there.
And in that context, that's why I spoke about the strengthening of identities. So even those 200 and so tribes, you'll see that through technology, we strengthen their identities. And if they have a grudge against another tribe, that will be sharpened strengthened. Exactly.
Civil war.
So because the opinions are very set, people belong to certain chat rooms and blogs and being bombarded by the kinds
creating
of content to strengthen identities.
And we see a little bit of that in Haiti in a different way.
In
more
fact,
so,
we even see that a little bit of that in the United States.
in the United
nowadays.
States. This is a global issue. But in the context of Haiti, I think you've painted a pretty important picture of this sense of self as a Haitian within the context of living inside of Haiti, and the lack of trust in the institutions because of the lack of opportunities, because of the lack of governance. So it really...
And because also that the public sector is overwhelmed by the demography. Because
growing population that all need to be serviced.
Exactly.
It's like being a small business growing too fast with too many customers and you don't have enough product to service all of them.
Exactly.
So this is a big issue.
It's a big issue.
So it's not just corruption, but it's the pressure of having to manage 11 million plus people.
When they were set to manage 5 million people.
Precisely.
So it's the corruption comes within it anyway for survival, but it doesn't start with corruption. It starts with the structure, the infrastructure
of the government itself.
And the enterprises, the businesses in Haiti are not set to serve the people properly. That's why when you get into some businesses, the person at the front desk kind of say, "What do you want?" As if, I don't want you to come and...
I don't want to serve you.
I don't want to serve you.
How can I help you? I'm watching a movie on my phone.
I don't want to help you.
Wow.
Come back tomorrow. Ooh. And you really get that. I've gotten that myself. So I know what
Customer
I'm talking
service.
about. So somehow... This is the part that would need for people to put pens down and redesign the servicing of the people.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be government alone, but it has to leverage NGOs, private organizations, anything that's,
providing a service to the people.
Providing a service. In Haiti, in the health sector, for example, you have the government, they have general hospital or university hospitals and things of that nature, and health centers, but none of them are working because they are overwhelmed. But in that same area, you may find that there is an NGO that has the same health care, etc. So that needs to be designed so that the government doesn't have to worry about intervening where an NGO is already intervening, or that maybe somehow some electronic exchange could take place between those institutions, and being able to delegate the service provision.
That's the key part, is the delegation, right?
Yeah.
And that comes from having a well-designed public-private partnership where the government, because it is a lot of pressure. You have a small government managing over 11 million plus people. It's a lot of people to manage. But if you partner with the private sector or the nonprofit sector, then you can multiply your effort and decentralize your ability to service.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. So public-private sector partnerships,
that's key.
Is a key.
It's a key in the one-done strategy also. In other words, I'll give you an example. In Rwanda, they had issues with rural health care. You had the same health centers that you could find in each little community, but that would not be working. But meanwhile, the government is paying for the nurses or the person but not paying enough. So the person is not happy, doesn't go to work, and people that are sick go to that center and do not find anyone to help them.
Yep.
Well, they decided with a not-for-profit firm in the U.S. to come and create sort of a franchise at each of those health centers that is co-owned by the not-for-profit and the former nurse that used to work there. So that nurse no longer works with the government, but has become an owner-operator of that
now
health
she's
center.
An entrepreneur.
She's an entrepreneur.
Wow.
That is, you see, a quick way to get things running. Decentralized, so that a nurse has the health center, and the NGO works in terms of providing health records, electronic health records, has a way to manage supply in terms of medication. Basic World Health Organization recommended medication that should exist in a health center. So that NGO makes sure that those products are on the shelves all the time. So anytime something is prescribed to somebody, and that person buys at a very low price that medication, it gets inputted into an electronic application that deducts this medication into the general inventory. Yes, so as they are deploying new medication every week, they know what to bring to each of those health centers, etc., etc. And that gives an extraordinary support to the public health system. So it's a good example that
public-private partnership.
It's a good public-private partnership.
But that came from willingness from the leadership at the government level to want to service your people and to want to find solutions such as this that enable the government to decentralize itself and provide to more people than it had capacity to do so. Coming back into the context of Haiti, are you seeing that we have that willingness within government to get us to that point of partnering with the private sector, of partnering with NGOs, and expanding the capacity of government to serve, or government institutions?
You see, right now it's difficult to talk about Haiti and governance because, in fact, it's a failed state. It has a prime minister slash president that is not necessarily legal. They assassinated the president, and it's a mess. There is no parliament to enact laws, and the judiciary is decimated from its
So there
judges.
are no government institutions that are legitimate at the moment.
Yes. So one cannot say that nowadays they are not doing this and that. It just doesn't exist.
It does not
at
exist.
all. It's an extraordinary situation for a country to find itself into, meanings that there is nothing there. Anything could have.
But
could
there's
happen.
activity. There's activity, and I've been seeing, P.M.L. Yelani, who is the acting prime minister at the moment, posting on Twitter all of his activities. What would you call those activities? Because there are people involved. I see, ambassadors coming in, shaking hands. So there's activity, but how would that be classified if these are not legitimate?
Those are more preparation towards something else.
Okay.
So it's a transitional government that is there to appease the political parties, work on diminishing the insecurity in certain key areas of the country, and lay the ground for perhaps a new constitution. And then have elections afterwards. That's sort of the timeline for what that person is doing. And they may even change that person along the course, because while is sort of trying to put some equilibrium, he has people that are saying is that he's not competent to do so. So you always have that fight, that continuous fight for
Opposition.
power, for the power for power, because none of these transitional governments have the legitimacy or the exact legitimacy to prepare programs that would meet the challenges that we've been talking about in this podcast. First of all, they cannot have access to loans from international organizations, and a country needs to spend even if national debt continues to increase. But if you don't spend, it's even worse, because you won't even have the strength to wake up at some point, and that's almost as a failed state. Haiti is falling into the space of being so down that it cannot wake up to generate new ideas or finance new ideas, because you have to have the blood or the cash to and depending on your stature as far as governance is concerned, you won't get any loans from at least the known entities. And once you can't do that as far as governance is concerned, you become prone to dirty money of sorts. So in order for the government to survive, it even agree on
getting mixed up in the wrong things just to have some cash,
etc. So at that point, you cannot have real programs that are addressing real issues with that kind of an atmosphere. And even with the government appears to be uniform, but there are a few heads, almost heads of states, each in their own, space of sort. They just sort of negotiate a peaceful way of keeping things going, but it's not like an harmony for the greater good.
Right. So it's a semblance of activity, of governance, but missing the legitimacy of a true government and the resourcing from having capital to spend. I mean, Haiti just experienced another earthquake last August and pretty much ravaged several towns in the south. That's a lot of rebuilding that has to take place, and you need cash for that.
You need cash
You need
for
cash
that.
to
It
rebuild.
needs to be designed. It
Yeah.
needs to be built differently.
Yeah.
It needs to take the opportunity to expand on development, because it's not just about paying a few houses that were affected, but it's a matter of rebuilding. Rebuilding is
Yeah.
bigger than reconstructing a
Yeah.
house.
Yeah.
So
In
that
many
has to
ways.
encompass
Yeah.
a development, a
Yeah.
rezoning, a repurposing of areas.
Right.
Take the opportunity to do all of that,
Yeah.
to exploit the landscape
Yeah.
for tourism. So looking
Yeah.
at the future as you are rebuilding
From
not
scratch.
from scratch. Yeah.
And, being in the tech world and wanting to use tech as as something that can be compared to what we're talking right now, it's almost as if there needs to be a reset and a reformatting of the institutions that enable governance, because it's not functioning, it's not legitimate, and it doesn't have capacity to serve 11 million people. And just putting in place a new government is not going to enable a prosperous nation.
No, it's not.
We need to press the reset button and start from scratch.
And we are young. It's 218 years country. It can spend a few years at redesigning
The planning stage.
the structure.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's nothing. And that you would have the foresight of upcoming challenges such as climate change, automation, artificial intelligence. So in the rebuilding, you put all of that into consideration to be a different nation. There is an opportunity in this failed state status that Haiti has right now to rebuild, to reconsider everything, reimagine, be creative, and not be scared about it. And there will be failures in what's being constructed, but you have to take the risk, calculated risk, try to have people, in fact, in the diaspora even, because I know that eventually you'll want to lead into diaspora engagement. I do believe somehow the diaspora could be structured in a way for that rebuilding, in terms of its role in the rebuilding. And I think that there you would find millions of people, because if everybody considers himself or herself as an antenna of that rebuilding, in just collecting information, do some research, throw in some ideas into a pot of new ideas, etc., for those ideas to be sorted out and
incubated, funded, launched.
Exactly. And come up maybe with a new financial infrastructure, a new way of using money itself. This is a good time, because there is nothing to fix per se, and that's interesting. There is nothing to fix.
We just need to start from scratch.
Yes.
That's an interesting point, and I think it's important to end this episode with that piece, is that we don't need to fix anything. It's already broken into millions of small pieces. We need to rebuild from scratch. Fresh product, looking at the 11 million plus people who need to be served, and tapping into not just the government as the leadership that can service these people, but how the government can partner with the private sector, the NGOs, to multiply the ability to service. So I know that in the past we've talked about how much time is needed for this to happen, and you touched on 5 years. 5 years to give ourselves time to really redesign. Can you close us off with what that would look like? What would we be doing in those 5 years?
Inventory. First thing of both people,
Yeah.
demography. Is it really 11? Is
it more?
11.5?
Is it 15 million?
Is it 15? We need to do that.
Yeah.
And not only count them, but identify them for good.
Yeah.
Because you cannot wait until you're 18 years old to have an
license.
identification card,
Yeah.
which only count people that
Right.
voluntarily wanted to have an identification card.
Right.
But a lot of them do not even know that you should have an identification card.
So there's a lot of people who
so
are
you
not
should be identified as you are born.
Right.
That's where
Right.
you should be
added to the
identified.
system of
Yes.
people who live
Who
in
live
Haiti.
in
Yeah.
in that place.
Okay.
You should revise and revise the cadastre. The cadastre is the land. What belongs to whom? What is still state-owned land? What is their level of quality for different kinds of agricultural projects, create new urban concepts that can absorb
growing
the upcoming
flow.
demography,
Yeah.
and design those urban settings in a way that it can grow. It has the
Adapt.
space for growth
Yeah.
in the years to come. So really plan for the next 100 years as far as the format of these
Right.
urban and design those urban settings in a way that makes you feel better about other people.
Quality of
because
life.
it's in the design,
An
the
aesthetic.
feel, exactly.
You want to
Beauty.
live there. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of how you reconceive the whole thing. So that would be the generation of the 2020s that decided to make the sacrifice to do just that.
5
And
years.
they won't be the beneficiary of that time
Yeah.
a little bit, but you leave something behind
Right.
for the generation to come,
come.
and for Haiti to really have
Reach
its
its full
1804 and 2020s.
Yeah.
If you marry those two, you have a very influential country. Because I continue to believe that I don't know in how many years, but Haiti could position itself as the platform for Africa to serve the world. Because as Africa will start improving itself as far as its negotiation with its natural resources, but it will need pied-à-terre just like those other countries wanted pied-à-terre to use for development, economic development. Well, Africans will want to have pied-à-terres, meaning quasi-colonize, not to use such term. But the colony is not necessarily a bad thing.
The Americas.
Yeah, no, man, but the colony is not necessarily a bad thing, especially if it's accepted that, yes, let's partner to serve the Americas.
Yeah.
That's an extraordinary proposition.
That would be a turning point.
Oh, that would be a turning point for both Africa and Haiti, because it could be maybe a platform for natural resources transformation, for example. Because if you take mines and mines of graphite, the real product that people are going to use in their solar panels that will replace silicon is a product called graphene. But graphene is a residue of graphite. So you have a lot of graphite in Africa, which is the next level of energy service. So graphene, Haiti could get the graphite, transform it
and service
into
the
Americas.
That would be a turning point. Yes. That would be a turning point. So if I hear you, if we Haitians were to take 5 years to really be heads down, reset, reformat, and relaunch Haiti, we would need to start with an inventory of our people, knowing how many people are part of this Haitian nation. The second thing is to rethink how our cities are designed and can be adapted. And then the third is looking at our relationships with other countries or continents like Africa that can really enable us to be a strategic power for servicing regions like the Americas or the world at large. So it's possible.
It's possible.
5
and it's
years,
exciting.
heads down.
Yes.
That's what we need to do.
Yeah. It's an exciting proposition, and you would see the engagement of everyone. As I said, as I mentioned, the diaspora could engage itself just by providing information, by collecting and really look for competitive edges in all sorts of ways, like
in
all
that planning
other countries
phase.
do. Yes.
In that planning phase, everyone play a role in the planning phase.
Yes.
That's key. All right. Well, until the next episode, thank you very much.
Thank you all.